So welcome everybody today on the session Beyond the Binary and Trans Inclusion. My name is �㧡🬡🐺. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm the Global Vice President of Digital Sales and Regional LGBTQ leader at Finastra. So I am so super excited to have the thought leaders on our panel that we have today. First, as a people leader. Secondly, as someone who's very passionate about diversity and inclusion. And thirdly, as an open lesbian, and when it comes to gender expression, I really do not fit into the binary of male and female. I'm very, very fluid and very comfortable in both my masculinity, femininity, and everything that sits within that spectrum as well. So without further ado, let's move to our panel. So if you wouldn't mind, Vihaan and Amita, if you could introduce yourselves and perhaps very quickly kind of say why you believe trans inclusion is important. So perhaps I could start with you, Amita.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Hi, all. I'm Amita. Before we get into the discussion, I hope all of you are safe. Especially in India now, we are in second wave. Situation is quite bad. So the Indian audience, hopefully you are following social distancing, wearing masks and taking care of yourselves. So now coming back to what I do professionally. So I'm a vice president with a captive of a global bank. So I'm the site head for the testing practice, leading a global testing team. And apart from that, I'm also passionate about advocacy to drive inclusion forward. And that passions, maybe the genesis is from my own journey of gender transition. But then when it comes to the journey of my gender transition, I always wanted to be the woman that I always aspired for. So post my gender transition, I always wanted to fit into binary. So after my transition, legally, socially, my gender is very much binary, which is female. So that is where, if you look at the struggles that maybe I have been going through or face on a daily basis, might not be the same. The severity or the intensity of the struggles might not be the same as that of an individual who do not fit into the binaries. So yeah, I mean, yeah, so that is what I want to say from the introduction perspective. Yeah, thanks, Kelly.
Perfect, thank you. And Vihaan, perhaps you can introduce yourself and equally why trans inclusion is important to you too.
Thank you, Kelly, and hi, Amita, as well. Thank you for your introduction. My name is Vihaan Peethambar, and I'm part of the diversity and inclusion team with human capital management at Goldman Sachs, where I'm responsible to drive the inclusion agenda and inclusion networks engagement for India strategic locations. Just a bit about my background. My career in DNI followed my journey in LGBT advocacy, which began in 2016. Owing to my own experiences as a person of trans experience. So I was female gender assigned at birth. And I've for a big part of my life, I've, struggled with gender dysphoria, and just basically struggled in navigating an Indian society where even today, to a large part, the rights of transgender people are not a daily reality, right? So I think today I'm an expert committee member of India's first National Council for Transgender Persons, which was constituted in 2020. And I also sit on the boards of multiple community-based organizations, namely Malayali Trans Men Association, which is the first community-based organization for trans masculine persons, which I co-founded in Kerala, my home state. I also sit on the boards of Dwaya Transgender Arts and Charitable Society and Queer. So for me, when it comes to trans and non-binary inclusion, especially from a corporate standpoint, today corporate leaders agree that diverse and inclusive workplaces are more productive, versatile, and adaptive in a changing marketplace. But often when managers even today think about gender diversity, they think only about gender parity between gender men and women, or about opening traditionally male occupations to women or vice versa, right? So creating a transgender inclusive workplace is an opportunity to create even more awareness about gender and to eliminate the prejudices and limitations we impose on people because of our assumptions about gender and sex stereotypes. So employers may not even be aware that they may already have transgender people in their workforce. Not all transgender people will go through an on-the-job transition, nor will they be obvious in their appearance, right? So some employees may have transgender family members or friends, and knowing that there are employers who actively do not discriminate against this segment of the population can be a huge source of relief and even pride, right? So I think today I have more than 11 or 12 years of work experience, but it wasn't until I joined Goldman Sachs that I can truly say that I am myself, I bring my authentic self to work. So imagine, it's just been, I would say, more than 1.5 years since I've bringing my whole self to the workplace. So I would say it's very, very pertinent and very, very important and should be top of mind for everyone.
Agreed. And I do believe there was a recent study by the World Bank that actually said, when it comes to transphobia and homophobia, it has massive impact on shrinking our workforce, having impacts on our health and services and everything. And it's estimated that it's cost the Indian economy or could cost the Indian economy up to about 32 billion, which is huge, and a really, really good reason why we need to be focused on inclusion. So thank you both for being very vulnerable and sharing your stories and being here today. Hopefully you don't mind, sharing perhaps your coming out story in the workplace and perhaps something that you would have wished your employer to have done a little bit differently at the time. So Amita, perhaps we could start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure, Kelly. So when it comes to the journey of my transition, I transitioned whilst working for my erstwhile organization. The organization had policies around gender transition globally, but when it comes to the Indian context, it was happening for the first time. What mattered for me was the intent to hold my hand and walk in the journey of gender transition, which the organization willingly showed. So, like I mentioned, from the legal framework perspective at the workplace, the organization showed the willingness to grow in that aspect along with me. That's how it led to, could be infrastructural changes from the washrooms perspective, or the policy level changes when it comes to having the name, display name, and the legal records name change and various things like that. So what could the organization have done? Of course, I mean, if these policies would have been there before even I embarked upon my journey, maybe that would have been easier, but then I would have been the trailblazer or the change agent, as I call myself. So if I want to take that credit, then so it was kind of a blessing in disguise for me. So yeah, that's how it has been. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Vihaan, if you wouldn't mind sharing your story as well.
Sure. That's very heartening to hear, Amita. I mean, that's a very positive, story that first time I'm hearing, because it's very, very much, my story is very much in contrast in that, I started my professional career pre-transition in 2008, and I've faced harassment, bullying, and discrimination only because of my gender identity. This have affected my mental health significantly. I often quit jobs looking for a workplace where I could be my authentic self. I've had managers who moral policed me, who teased me for my clothes and hairstyle, and asked me why I just couldn't behave like a woman and get married, because that's why women are born, right? All of them eventually have to get married at that. So unable to find a space in organizations where, I could just be myself. I moved out of India, and leaving behind friends and family to seek better opportunities for myself. But so a big part of my career, I worked in Stockholm, I worked in Dubai, where again, in the Middle East, it's LGBT, being LGBT is against the law. So I was just hiding myself again. But when I heard about the legal and social progress in transgender inclusion in India, I returned back in 2016, giving up, a fairly comfortable life abroad to complete my legal transition. And what followed was a 6-month battle with the state government of Kerala, my native state, wherein I had to lobby and educate government officials about the policies which they were obligated to implement. So 5-6 years ago, when I came back, I had never heard of companies that had LGBT policies in India, or companies that provided gender affirmation coverage for trans employees. So for me, I had to quit my job. I had to complete my legal and medical transition and then look for a job from scratch, which was very difficult, right? So my options for LGBT inclusive companies in India were quite few at that time. And the ones who were inclusive did not have open roles I could apply to. So there were no organizations like Pride Circle and the others who are doing such amazing work today, who invested in providing job opportunities for LGBT community at that time where I was looking for a job. So I joined an Indian corporate in 2018 through a friend's referral, and I kept my gender identity a secret. But however, everyone found out that I was a trans person as there were media reports about my life, because I was quite active in advocacy, and they started talking about me quite frequently. For senior leaders in the firm, I was their lunchtime gossip, as they would joke about how I studied in a girls' college. My colleagues would misgender me intentionally and then say it was all in good fun. Right? So I felt my performance being affected, and I no longer wanted to work at a company that did not see what value I brought to the team as a professional, but was more focused on my gender identity and made assumptions about me based on that. So my experiences made me wonder whether this organization was genuinely invested in LGBT, because they had LGBT inclusion as one of their D&I focus areas. So just my experiences just made me wonder whether this organization was genuinely interested in LGBT inclusion, or was it merely a branding exercise for them, right? In such cases, companies, I would say, really need to introspect whether they are ready to start conversations on LGBT inclusion and not just see it as a checklist to be ticked off. When you are ready, please engage with LGBT individuals and subject matter experts to make meaningful changes in your organizations. And I would say invest the most on building your culture and educating yourselves before doing anything else.
Gosh, I'm so sorry to hear kind of what you've gone through and everything. I think there's a lot of microaggressions, and that's microaggressions, to be clear to everyone in the audience, are, hearing someone say something that puts you down, or you're laughing at you, or also misgendering you, equals all these are all forms of microaggressions that are still a lot in the workplace. But there's also a lot that when we talk about microaggressions and how we behave, that we can be more mindful of. And then it would be great, Amita, if you could maybe go through some examples of how, as employees and even friends and things like how we can be more mindful when it comes to trans and non-binary inclusion.
Yeah. So see, the thing is, first, according to me, what lacks is a lot of us don't understand our privileges. If I also need to be honest, when I decided to transition, there was this phase wherein I completely discounted my own privileges. Of course, I do come from certain privileged background, and then as so sad to hear so many struggles Vihaan had to go through. So I only got to realize my privileges when I really consciously invested efforts in understanding those privileges. Similarly, at the workplaces, especially when it comes to the cishet individuals, especially cishet men, the first thing they will have to do is they need to understand their privileges. And by privileges, we are not talking about, which metro city you come from, which small town you come from, what kind of an education, are you coming from an international kind of an education system, or you're coming from a regional kind of an educational system. Privileges, we are talking about having different life journeys. Especially if you look at the LGBTI plus individuals, and further in that, the individuals who do not fit into binaries, their life journeys are extremely difficult. Every day there is this struggle, every moment there is this struggle. And that is where the cishet individuals do not have to go through those struggles. They are a lot privileged on that aspect. So the first step in that journey is all these individuals need to understand their privileges. Then second aspect is, the impact. So the focus needs to be changed. So intent doesn't matter, impact matters. A lot of us don't understand everything. Even I came from a very boxed kind of an upbringing. So through my journey, I learned various aspects around gender identity, sexual orientation, gender expression. Till that point, if I need to be really honest, I was quite illiterate, because that's the milieu I come from. That's the education system I come from. Nobody spoke about it. Nobody taught. And anything that was, let's say, accidentally even visible, we were asked to ignore it. We were asked to kind of treat this as it doesn't exist. And that's the culture which I also inculcated. So I never understood or paid attention to this aspect of diversity. Through my own journey, I realized various things which I'm still learning, because it's quite vast. And that is where, if I put myself in this kind of a position, imagine the privileged individuals, what kind of a knowledge they will be having. That is where impact matters. You are bound to make mistakes. You are bound to misgender people. It's okay. Apologize, move on, because at the end of the day, the impact that you are creating is what matters. And then, as we always say, ally is a verb. So that is where when individuals really want to be ally, especially when it comes to the LGBTI plus individuals, they need to demonstrate it through their actions. And one of that action is growing a spine. I mean, all those blocks, mental blocks that you have, that just standing by an LGBTI plus individuals may question your own sexuality, may question your own gender identity, rise above that. That's where you need to grow the spine. And then take pride in being an ally. If you really want to be an ally, take pride in being that and celebrate it. So yeah, I think these are the couple of points which I want to add.
No, thank you. And I think you make some very important points. We're all brought up in the binary world, right? So that's kind of the normalized world that we have. And we've got to think about that as well for our allies. I think very, very important. But equally for allies, we do need you. And we do need you to stand up for us. And equally, no one's perfect. But, when there are some points where perhaps you do misgender, just apologize and then it's okay. This is a journey for everybody when we're talking about inclusion. So for both of you, you have done some fantastic work within your organizations, and your organizations are doing some brilliant things regarding trans and non-binary inclusion. Vihaan, would you mind sharing particularly, what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So, definitely at Goldman Sachs, inclusivity is essential, for us to have an environment where LGBT people want to come and build a career, right? So our LGBT inclusion efforts started back in 2009, where we established an LGBT network, and employees are encouraged to join this network and participate in LGBT initiatives throughout the year, which today has more than 700 members, which includes allies and members from the community, right? So for us, building inclusive culture internally is paramount. So our sensitization and training efforts are all encompassing, and we have a number of programs that are run throughout the year, ensuring that we're able to impact every employee in the firm to become visible allies. So just a couple of the programs I'd like to mention. One is a reverse mentoring program, which provides managing directors the opportunity to learn from LGBT employees about their experiences. We facilitate town halls and anonymous dial-ins to hear about the challenges on the ground from the community, as well as allies within the workplace. And this also serves as a feedback mechanism to enhance an inclusive work environment. We also run a straight talk program, which is a facilitated dialogue hosted by senior leaders to engage in an awareness building conversation with the employees of a division. We launched the Pronouns Initiative a couple of years back to raise awareness on transgender and gender non-conforming communities. So apart from educating employees on the different types of pronouns, we also provide guidance on how an employee can use pronouns and offer new avenues for our people to proactively self-identify, including, email signatures or business cards. And also this is something, very, very close to me, because I did, in my previous answer, I did talk about the negative side of my experiences, but I would say it was the most liberating experience just interviewing with Goldman Sachs, right? So every time, in the past when I've had to interview, I always used to avoid or lie about the part where there is a 2-year or 3-year gap in my career. right? And that was the hiatus that I took to complete my legal and medical transition. And I'm sure this is the case for a lot of transgender people in India, because when you don't feel safe approaching your employer to mention, or maybe your employer does not have trans-friendly policies, you basically quit your job, complete your transition, and then go join somewhere else. And never in the past have I been able to talk about this, but at Goldman Sachs, in the interview process, was the first time that without any fear I just spoke about it, and the response, it was okay. They were like, okay, fine. So what next, right? So I would say everyone in the firm talks about LGBT inclusion day in and day out. So it's not that if you're just mindful if there's an LGBT person around you, and then you are a little conscious and mindful of what you say, but it's just part and parcel of your daily life. And I think that's something we need to normalize, right? It's something that I'm extremely proud of, is that the firm launched the LGBTQ+ inclusion toolkits last year, which are great resources for managers and employees to understand how to create an inclusive environment. And this has an additional section focused on transgender inclusion, right? So this toolkit basically helps managers and employees understand their roles and responsibilities in helping a trans employee, during their transition at the firm. So these toolkits also covers appropriate and inclusive terminology and behaviors, and all the firm's resources for support. And I think it's a very great resource document for inclusive behaviors and any questions an employee in the organization can have. Just one last part that I'd like to add is that I think Goldman Sachs is one of few firms, might be in India, that raises the transgender and pride flags in our office premises. And I remember the year that I joined, and on Transgender Day of Remembrance, when they hosted the transgender flag, I had tears in my eyes, because I remembered every friend or my extended family members from the transgender community that I lost, due to hate crimes or violence. And, might be, and there were like 100, 200 people who had gathered for that. Might be not every person understood, the true meaning of it, but it meant so much, to me. So I can just imagine what it meant for other trans and gender non-conforming employees in the organization. So I said every bit of action, or, inclusive action or allyship that you show in your firm makes a huge difference to your employees.
Fantastic. And it sounds like, Goldman Sachs are kind of real trail blasters going out there regarding inclusion. I might steal a couple of things. I love the reverse mentoring. That sounds fantastic. And I also have seen, even at Finastra, managers struggling to have conversations. So I really love the toolkit aspect there. So Amita, when it comes to Citi, I know equally, been doing fantastic things there. Would you mind sharing some of the, kind of programs and initiatives that you've been doing regarding inclusion as well?
Yeah, sure. A lot of this information have been made available in the public domain as well, such as Citi rolling out the same gender partner benefits. Yeah. So, even like Vihaan made a very important point here, keeping that access open. So if you look at in my personal capacity, I have always ensured that I don't lose out on any opportunity where I can create that awareness. So, so far it has been more than 30 MNC organizations where I have been involved in the advocacy activities, majorly from creation of this education or sensitization perspective, because like I mentioned previously also, a lot of us come from this boxed kind of an milieu wherein we don't understand things. So I never lose out of this opportunity of having that conversation, because at the end of the day, I think that is the beginning of the broader changes that need to happen at the organization level in terms of, let's say, legal rights and protection at the workplace. So because in the Indian context, if you see, after Section 377, what needs to be improved at the workplaces is the legal rights and protection. So we are still not there. If you look at the cishet individuals, cishet employees at the workplace, the kind of legal rights and protection they have at the workplace, individuals from the LGBTI+ community do not have the same rights, legal rights and protection at the workplace. So that is something which really need to be paid attention to. That is something which, and so of course there are positive changes happening. For example, when Swiggy rolled out the menstruation leaves, that was also extended to trans women, which is kind of a very welcoming move. Similarly, now almost every organization have got ERGs working for the LGBTI plus individuals. Now, having ERGs really matters when it comes to creating that support system at the workplace. Having ERG really matters at the workplace to kind of drive that legal changes in terms of legal framework and protection at the workplace. What needs to be improved upon maybe is the sponsorship. So, yes, celebration of Pride Month is very much welcome, is a welcome move. Displaying your logos in rainbow color across social platforms is a welcome move. Running initiatives wearing, all the colleagues wearing those or carrying rainbow placards and flags and saying pride is a welcome move. But at the same time, put money where your mouth is. At the same time, rise above this rainbow capitalism. Look at what actually needs to be done so that every single individual, every single employee from the LGBTI plus community possesses the same legal rights and protection at the workplace as that of any other individual. So yeah, that's
I agree. I agree. I think that part as well about speaking out and education is so incredibly important, because I think when we look at it, and yes, we grow up indoctrinated in the binary world, that also means that because of that, we create stereotypes and biases. So to drive that education is incredibly important. So it's great the Citi and both yourself, keep pushing forth and doing great things there. I agree with you. ERGs, I think if it's not a tick box exercise and done in the right way, really helps support not only awareness, but support for the employees as well. And I can say, even in myself, in my ERG, we've had a couple of parents actually where their kids are going through transition and suffering mental health and bullying and everything like that. And we've been able to connect them with charities and counselling, and that's incredibly important to support our community internally in the family as well. So I agree. And finally, on sponsorship and policies, putting your, your money where your mouth is, so important. And I would encourage all leaders, companies out there to really look at your policies to check that they truly are inclusive. And there are so many, organizations out there that can help you do that and start as well. So from what's been going on in the last 10 years regarding trans and non-binary inclusion, you can hear already, I think, very much that we're on a road and a journey, and we've made some progression, but equally there's a lot to go. Vihaan, would you mind sharing particularly within India the way that you've seen inclusion develop within the last 10 years?
Yeah, I would say that Kerry, the NALSA judgment, of the Supreme Court of India, which was announced in April 2014, it played a huge role in moving the needle for transgender inclusion in the country in all spheres. Right? So the most significant clause of this judgment was the self-identification of a person's gender as man, woman, or transgender. And that gave space for a lot of transgender people to seek legal recognition for their gender. Right? And Kerala, which is one of the first states, and it is my home state, like I mentioned earlier, was one of the first states to launch a state transgender policy in 2015. And we call this the most progressive policy because it was modeled on the statutes of the NALSA judgment, right? So, however, like I mentioned earlier, when I came back from abroad to complete my legal transition, I was shocked that this policy was merely on paper when I approached government offices to change my gender markers in 2016, which is 1 year after the policy was launched. So it has taken years of lobbying and educating government officials to implement at least 50% of the policy, and that too has gaps to do, right? And Kerala is one of the most progressive states also called in India. So we cannot even say that the efforts on transgender, empowerment or welfare are the same for all the other states in India, right? But with the state, what this has opened up is that with the state governments putting their weight in empowering the transgender community, this brought visibility to the community in India, right? And so the last 5 to 6 years, particularly in India, if you see, the visibility of the transgender community has increased, very much, immensely. And with this, what we saw is that corporates also got behind in their efforts of transgender inclusion. So in the corporate space, it definitely helps that most companies have global mandates, right? So, and so therefore they have insights into policies, they have insights into resources and training to sensitize their employees on transgender identities and inclusive behaviors. But however, where I feel a lot of work needs to be done is in culture building and leveling the play field for transgender people who already have a systemic disadvantage in their access to education and employment in India. And that's where most amount of work needs to be done.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting when I look at kind of what you say. First and foremost, sticks out is to create the change we have today has created years of lobbying, which Amita goes to your point about we cannot be silent. We need to be out there and driving the awareness to make sure that inclusion is there. But as a result of that lobbying and not being silent, you start to see changes. And when changes happen, more people feel comfortable being themselves equally as well. Which of course is better economically for companies and also socially for individuals as well. So when kind of we look, discussed a lot, I should say, about inclusivity in the workplace, but obviously there's another element that we talk about, which is diversity, and it's attracting talent into the workplace as well. And it would be great if you both don't mind sharing your thoughts on some of the best practices out there when it comes to kind of recruiting and hiring talent within the kind of the trans and non-binary community. Perhaps Amita, you could start first.
Yeah, sure. So, when it comes to hiring, there could be a lot of prevalent biases also. And there is this also kind of debate around meritocracy and representation. And certain kind of biases or misunderstandings also needs to be addressed. Like, for example, when we open a job profile or when we open a position, we don't have a clear definition of merit. Forget about representation for a moment. Even though we go through the privileged cis-het kind of way of hiring, still, you always take that risk. It cannot happen that the skill set that you are looking for, you will get a candidate who fulfills 100% what you're looking for that particular position. You always take that risk. So that means there is no clear definition of merit. And then the second misunderstanding or myth which needs to be debunked is meritocratic hiring is 100% meritocratic. We all know that's not the reality. And then why suddenly we start assuming that representation based hiring is non-meritocratic? It's not. All right. So once we rise above these misunderstandings and all, then we'll understand that why we need to have representation at the workplace. So coming back to my previous point, which I mentioned, understanding our privileges. Without having representation at the workplace, we will never understand our privileges. Even look at the cis-het binary lens. All men sitting at the, discussion table, they will not understand the importance of maternity leave unless there is a woman, cis-het woman sitting at that table. Similarly, this cis-het group of people will not understand the importance of gender transition for a person unless they have somebody sitting with them who has gone through the journey of gender transition. They will not understand the plight of a homosexual man at the workplace unless they have a homosexual man at the workplace. They will not understand the difficulty in terms of accessibility for a disabled or a specially abled person unless they go ahead and hire that person. And similarly, this thought process will also reflect in the solutions that we are rolling out. So for example, recently I got an opportunity to read a very interesting book. The book is Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Perez. So this book has got amazing insights, for example, Google Maps. All of us use Google Maps, but when initially Google Maps was launched, it did not have safety feature. So for example, if I want to use Google Maps after 10 p.m., for me, fastest route doesn't matter. For me, what matters is the safest route. But I was completely discounted because maybe mostly cishet men sat in the solution making process. For them, speed is what mattered. At least the cishet guy friends that I have, they always talk about speed. So based on that, I'm saying, so for them, speed only mattered, and that's why the solution only revolved around speed, not safety. Later on, they introduced the concept of safety. Similarly, Google's own surveys reveal that 67% times their, voice over command applications fail to detect voices apart from the conventional male voices. So that means when we talk about IoT, Internet on Things, how women or other individuals are expected to run applications using voice commands when your voice itself is not detected by these applications. Lot of face recognition, applications branded Black people as gorillas. So imagine all these flaws are happening in the solutions that you're rolling out because we are not considering diversity in the solution making process, right? So when you want to have solutions which cater to the every single, individual out there in the customer base, you need to look at your customer base. You need to ensure that the customer base is present in your product life cycle. So yeah, I mean, these are some basics through which I think we can address a lot of issues or the mental blocks that we have.
Agreed. Vihaan, what about some kind of the best practices you're seeing as well?
So I have a different take on hiring, Kelly. So I think, a lot of companies make their policies LGBTQ plus inclusive and then focus on external hiring immediately, as that ties into positioning them as an employer of choice or might be a branding exercise. But studies show that an estimated 5 to 10% of any population belong to the LGBT community. Hence, there is no doubt that all organizations beyond a certain size already have LGBT individuals, specifically trans individuals as well. So specifically in Goldman Sachs, obviously hiring is something definitely we focus, but our internal efforts are more on culture building, to have a continuous, consistent and all-encompassing efforts in ensuring you have an inclusive culture where employees feel comfortable being themselves and they feel safe reaching out to seek guidance, assistance, or even to avail organization provided insurance and benefits, right? So the first thing we hear about on the LGBT front is that companies have announced policies which gender affirmation coverage or same-sex partners. But if you ask any of these companies how many employees are actually availing these benefits, I'm sure it might not even be 2-digit numbers, right? So that speaks a lot about the culture of that organization, that are your LGBT employees or your trans employees coming forward to avail these benefits or your insurance coverage. And definitely I would say that mechanisms to track, monitor and put in measures for accountability for people in positions is important, right? It should tie in with performance management. If there are gaps and grievances, it's because someone hasn't done their job right. Right, and in these cases, what would you do? Hiring of transgender people in corporates, I would say, has definitely seen progress in the last few years. But I would also say, and this is something that we focus on, is investing on development programs and opportunities for these individuals to go up the ladder. It's not enough that you hire them, but what does the next 3 to 5 years for your trans employees look like? Are you setting them up for success? Right. So corporates need to look at hiring trans people more holistically, and not just as a mere crossing of their checklist. So I would say definitely a common comment that I hear when it comes to trans hiring in India is that we invest a lot of time and resources and money, but once we hire trans individuals, they leave the job, they quit the job after 2-3 months. And now I would say that's not a reflection on the employer, rather that's a reflection on the company, right? If that person is quitting the job, you have to do a deep dive into what went wrong. Was there not a safe environment? Was the person not comfortable at the workplace? And kind of do a deep dive into what went wrong, rather than look at that high talent pool as, okay, it is not worth investing our efforts into them, right? So definitely, and I would say building an inclusive culture is very, very important when it comes to not just hiring, but also making sure that your existing employees feel safe to come out and avail seek guidance or avail, the benefits that are provided by the organization. I'd just like to take a moment just to highlight some of the, and this is because these are amazing policies that Goldman Sachs has, and I'm just so proud of it. One is, they provide 4 weeks of paid family care leave for employees to care for family members, and this is inclusive of LGBT and transgender, gender non-conforming employees, acknowledging that a lot of trans and gender non-conforming employees in India don't have biological families, and they have chosen families, right? So this also extends to people to care for their chosen families, and you don't limit it to heteronormative structures, as per law. And also 26 weeks of parenting leave for all new parents, regardless of gender, right? So whether through birth, surrogacy, or adoption. And something that I'm extremely proud of is that we are one of the, among the first few firms in India to offer comprehensive gender information support under insurance, not just to employees, but also to dependents of employees. So something that, I'm so proud of that, I'm thinking, and something I'm really looking forward to adopt someday. And I'm just thinking, if I have a gender non-conforming child or a trans child, it would really work in my favor in that case. So I'm really, really proud of that.
Fantastic. So I think we've only got a minute or two left. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you so very much to you both. I have taken away a lot from today. And perhaps to leave the audience, perhaps you could both say what would be the 2 things that you would like the audience to walk away with and really start thinking about. So perhaps start with you, Amita.
Yeah, so I'll quickly summarize what I said. First is grow a spine. I've explained what does that mean. And second is put your money where your mouth is. So with that, I think I'll conclude the session. Thank you for the opportunity.
Love it. Vihaan.
Yeah, so I'd say 2 things, and this is to 2 groups, right? So one, I'd say to well-meaning allies, none of us grew up learning about sexual orientations and gender identities, which is a fact, right? So, but we have the choice to educate ourselves now, and there are a lot of wonderful resources available which can help you. So I would say do not wait for trans or non-binary person to educate you. Invest time in educating yourself and also sharing that information. And that is how you become a good ally, right? Stand up for trans people when people make transphobic jokes or comments, bust stereotypes and myths. Do this actively. There is nothing bad that can come out of you being a good ally. So why hold yourselves back? And lastly, I'd like to, just send a message to my trans and non-binary friends who are listening in. Be kind to yourself. You are enough and you are not alone, not anymore. So please reach out for any help you may need. There are many community-based organizations, allies, and employers who are looking to support us. So much love to you.
Thank you. And then thank you as well to the audience for tuning in, being inquisitive, being an ally, and being part of the community. So with that, I will wrap up, and I hope you took a lot from today's session.
Thank you.